Hi, everybody. I see we have a few people joining us already. We're going to wait a minute or two before we get started, just to give more people time to join. Thank you to everyone who's made the effort to join us on the night. I see people pouring in now. You'll see there is a chat function available, so do please use that to introduce yourselves, where you're calling in from. We have Sarah from Switzerland.
Ooh.
Vancouver Island.
Poland.
Poland, Munich, Sweden.
Good Lord.
Oh, we've finally got someone from Ushuaia. We've got both hemispheres now.
Oh, it's going fast now.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, as we've got quite a few people here, I'll get started first of all with some housekeeping notes. So as you've seen there, we have a chat function, and you can use this to discuss the same things the panelists are discussing. We also have a separate question and answer function. So if you have a question for our panelists tonight, please put your question there and not in the chat. You'll be able to see each other's questions and can respond to each other in there. And you can also upvote questions as well. You might also see some polls pop up. Those are just for fun. And if you need to leave at any point, this recording will be on YouTube, the PTGA's YouTube channel, and on the PTGA website very shortly after we finish. So we're going to get started with a few introductions. My name's Alex Cowan. I'm one of the board of directors of the Polar Tourism Guides Association. I'll be tonight's moderator. Joining us tonight as our panelists, we first of all have Jason Edmunds. He's our Arctic Canada expert. He spent many years working with Adventure Canada, and this year he was honored by the Explorers Club as one of the 50 people changing the world at the moment. We also have Troels Jacobson. He is a longtime expedition leader and guide in both the Arctic and Antarctic, and today is the field operations manager for AECO. So he's here as our AECO representative, expert on all things Svalbard and Greenland in particular. Ida Olsson is an expedition leader in both North and South, also works as a land-based guide in Svalbard, and in 2018 she skied the last degree to the North Pole. Ben Jackson, another long-time expedition leader in North and South and PTGA senior assessor, and he is one of the founders and owners of the Expedition Guide Academy with Pernille Surgaard. Mørten Jorgenson is an expedition leader and operator in the Arctic, and he's also the author of Polar Bears Beloved and Betrayed and Polar Bears on the Edge Heading for Extinction. And then last but not least, we have Graham Charles. He's a longtime expedition leader, leadership trainer, and of course, the founder of the Polar Tourism Guides Association. So he's here as our PTGA representative. In the background at the moment, we have Lauren Farmer, who is running our tech support as always. So with the introductions out of the way, we're going to get started with Troels. And Troels, I was hoping you could give us the main points AECO would like to share with guides this season.
Thanks, Alex, and thank you very much for inviting us, to this forum. It's great to be here. First of all, I think we just should sort of set the frame that there are none of the Svalbard regulations that have been put into motion or proposed at the moment. Some have been agreed upon, are coming into this season. 2024 is the same as 2023. So generally speaking, everything is the same, in principle at least. We do have from AECO a few new things and perhaps some reminders that we just want to bring forward for those of you who haven't done the field staff assessments yet. We have a new procedure. You need to self-register. You need to get in touch with your employer they'll send you a self-registration link and follow the procedures, and you'll get around that pretty easily. The site-specific guidelines are available in a Dropbox. Just read the information, please. That'll be great. We have a couple of smaller updates to a couple of guidelines, the seals and bears, among others, and also this is small clarifications. Anything really, not something fundamental. It's actually promoted by guides that have asked into some of these things. Now we managed to get it clarified. They'll be published shortly, within next week, I think, actually, these new ones. So just take note of that. We're also in the final stages of adding a little bit about biosecurity. All of you guys who've been in the South know how important that is, for sure. We would like to try and avoid that as much as possible, obviously also in the North, and we've added something basically for the operators to make sure of in our operational guidelines, to make sure that we have a little bit more in terms of biosecurity installed also in the Arctic. A couple of things that have been in place also last year, but have been unfortunately neglected a little bit. It is the 20-kilometer Ny-Ålesund radio silent radius, so 20 kilometers radius from Ny-Ålesund. So radio silent zone due to science going on there. It is something that's been very much stressed by Ny-Ålesund, that we need to keep this radio silent zone. The risk is that they will close off Kongsfjorden. Simply, you can't actually enter Kongsfjorden outside of that 20-kilometer zone. So, and since that from next year is one of those places that are actually open, largely, this will be pretty bad. So we really urge everyone to stick to that radio silent zone. We have a small update from the Jorgenson. Now it's called Research Station Specific Guidelines. Please sort of refer to that document. They wrote that themselves, and we're publishing it, and follow that, because we risk that they actually close it off. This is the real risk. The firearms regulations, the same procedures as last year, complicated to say the least, but it's the same. I think we're going to talk about bears in a little bit, so I'll just stand by with that. In terms of Greenland, also the same as last year, but also complicated. We had a sort of an evaluation meeting with the authorities in Greenland late last year, and visas for Greenland is actually also pertinent for crew and staff. So if you are a little bit in doubt, if you need a visa from Greenland to enter Greenland, also as staff, you will need such a visa. It can take 45 days to process. So get in touch with your operator and your employer to figure out if that's something you need. It will be sad to get into stupid, crazy things about that if you suddenly end up in not having a visa. Still have, it hasn't turned into law yet with the no-go zone and the 5-knot speed limit zone in the Scoresbysund area and south of that down to Kangerlussuaq. It's something that's still a recommendation, but a very strong recommendation. And we do expect that to be part of the new Greenland Tourism Act, which will be presented into a hearing process actually any day now. We've been informed April, so we'll see how that ends up. But please keep that in mind as well. That would be much appreciated. Also, perhaps new actually this year, visits to military stations in Northeast Greenland is no longer possible. It's no longer allowed. You can only actually go to the civilian part of Elaø. That's west of the river, but all other military stations in Greenland is off limits in East Greenland. So that's sort of what I have of sort of mostly reminders actually, because most things are actually the same as last year. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Troels. That's great. Do you have an update for? Oh, sorry, I have a question before we go on to this. In New Olsson, does that include VHF communications between guides and the ship?
Now I can't actually remember. I hadn't read up on the new guidelines, but the referral guidelines should be described there pretty carefully. I don't think it's VHF. It is primarily Wi-Fi and Bluetooth type connections, but it is it's very, very sensitive scientific equipment they're using, and they're picking it up all the time. And even though the ban was in place last year, it was very often not adhered to. So they were not very happy. We need to try and respect that, or we're going to make it a lot harder for ourselves in the future.
Understood. And so we know there are new Svalbard guidelines coming in next year, but is there anything new in terms of our approach to wildlife in Svalbard this year that guides should be aware of?
As I mentioned, sort of in principle, not. But then still, you may need to be aware of a few things. I have made a little, I'm going to share my screen and make with a little PowerPoint. It's not much at all, but I just wanted to, let's see if I can get this to work. I hope you can see my screen. It's in connection with the proposed changes for the Environmental Act, which includes the polar bear approaching situation, which is still a proposal. It's not been officially sort of passed or anything in Parliament. But in connection with this proposal to Parliament, the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Environment in Norway have made a larger document called the Proposition 47L. And it's a long document that describes what has been proposed, the hearing replies from different entities, private people, companies, organizations, including AECO, and so on and so forth. And in that document, they actually define the current interpretation of the law. So it's not something new in that sense, but it's just the first time, as far as I know, that we have a definition of how they would see the law going on, or being interpreted, actually. And this may lead to some reflections among you when you're out there to try and give it a, let's see if I can, oops, sorry. So this is an unofficial translation of a Norwegian document. I don't think it exists in English, actually, an official translation. So with that in mind, disturbance is not to be interpreted in a limited way. For example, disturbance include all situations where the behavior of the polar bear changes as a consequence of human presence. This is a rather strict interpretation of the law, if you ask me. I'll just delete it because it does include examples as well. Getting up from a resting position, interrupt eating, keep swimming rather than going ashore, etc., etc. To lure, also an interesting one. I can't tell you what under certain circumstances means. This is something that is up for discussion, I guess, in the case. But if a vessel stops in a way that a bear becomes curious and approaches the vessel to investigate further, means that one uses the vessel as an attractant in a way that is included in the prohibition. Something one also should keep in mind. To pursue, seek out. Prohibition against pursuing polar bears is valid in all cases where you follow a bear. And to seek out, according to the word of the law, includes moving to a place where one has information that a bear is present. And that was it. So with those words in mind, as I mentioned, to my best knowledge, this has not been defined in any official way before. So it's worthwhile keeping in mind when you get in the field and start looking at bears. I can tell you that AECO, and in cooperation with Visit Svalbard, with lots of also individuals, other companies, are working very hard to argue our way out of this proposal with the polar bear regulations that are supposed to be in place for next year. And we really urge you all to be very conservative when it comes to polar bears. The indiscretions in this regard will really make the efforts from not only us, but everyone really hard to argue if we get particularly sort of incidences with bear disturbance. So please be conservative.
It's great. Thank you very much for that, Troels. And so this is the point where this is why we invite experienced expedition leaders in Svalbard, such as Ida and Ben and Mørten here. So give them an opportunity to discuss what this maybe means for guides and expedition leaders in Svalbard. Ida, do you want to make any comments on this?
Yes, first, by the way, I can comment about the thing about the radios. I just looked now on the guidelines. It actually says nothing about the radios of the VHF, if you can use them or not. So it doesn't mention that you couldn't. So just to put it out there at least. Yeah, so about, of course, the bears, and just to put attraction again about resting maybe by the ice, maybe even anchor up on it and waiting for the polar bear. Of course, I mean, last year we even had ship that was fined for doing that when the bear came up. So of course that is a thing I guess we shouldn't of course do still, even if it does still happen already now, when we have so much fast ice here this year. This is incredible. Since 2004 it's never been this much ice as we have this year, and there's of course gives very little room for those ships that have arrived now to come up to go anywhere, and many of them are breaking the fast ice, which we've seen from guests that are coming on with me on snowmobile tours right now. They're showing this right now, and that I think is important, that we try to be strong and actually try follow at least those regulations. We still have them in, and right now this is a time when the seals are out on the ice, and very important that they stay there in that way. But of course, otherwise for the regulations, I don't know if you want mainly for also about the next year, if that is going to come later on. But I think one of the big main changes and things might be that we have to do a lot more zodiac cruising. I think that is going to be one major thing, especially if it is up to 100 ships around in the area. And if we're going to have to kind of get along and yeah, be on all these places. But there is also a lot of places actually on the map, if you look, that it's possibilities to look for new areas too. In Storfjord, or on the east side of Spitsbergen, there's a area that it could be possibilities to find maybe new places that could be possible to make some landings. Who knows? Because I mean, we have many places in Jorgenson, only 39 people can land there. And of course, then even the 100 passenger ships that before could land with everyone have to start making rotation operations, which maybe they are not used to. So I do think what's important is that the ones that actually take on a job as an expedition leader understand how important that role is to make it a good trip, and know the knowledge of what to do, what can we not do, and the knowledge of maybe, yeah, everything. I would say weather and maps and ice charts and yeah, finding new good places and what we can do and not do. I think is maybe a big thing. Yeah, maybe someone else want to add some more, of course.
That's great. Thank you, Ida. And just to reiterate for everyone, when Ida was talking about the 39 limit there, that's something that's expected to come in next year.
Next year, yes.
Happening this year. I was interested in what you were saying just there about a vessel fined for being at the fast ice edge and a bear coming over. So Ben, you and I and Mørten all work on a ship for whom mooring to fast ice and mooring to ice floes is a standard way of stopping for the night, regardless of polar bear presence. Do you have any comments on, a vessel being fined, the risks we take in doing sometimes normal things and how it's perceived by others?
Yeah, well, I'll come back to a couple of other points, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, so to just add a little bit more detail to what you were speaking to, Alex, on some of the smaller ships, you have a different bridge setup, so you don't have as many officers on board. And so it's not uncommon to try and park up overnight to rest the navigation team. And that was a bit of a surprise for me moving off the bigger ships. So yeah, I'm actually quite surprised to hear that somebody was fined because of I wondered about the repercussions there. So yeah, I think it's going to add challenges to operations in ways that we haven't seen or understood so far. And then, I think I'll be curious to see how it pans out as well, because you could certainly argue, from a safety perspective, that stopping for the night to rest your crew, who are ultimately running long seasons. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something. When I first heard about the restrictions coming up, I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is going to get loopholed by some ships and things like that. And I think also, and maybe I'm cracking the can of worms a little bit here, I see lots of the industry being tarred with the same brush, but, if you have a smaller ship pull up and overnight on the ice edge versus a larger ship, which I've also seen, there's certainly different impacts that happen on that front there. So I suspect Mørten's going to add to this, but I think, to circle back to also one of your first questions, Alex, I think it's going to be really important for expedition teams and primarily the leadership teams on board, so the ELs or AELs. They're going to have to take hold of the narrative on board pretty early on with guests. I mean, people are fairly well read and understand some of what's going to happen here. So I think it's going to be important that expedition teams take hold of the narrative of their trip and own that a little bit more than perhaps they have been, because I mean, we all know that the marketing department drives expectations a lot as well. So anyway, I won't monologue too much.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, and I think that's going to lead us into some stuff later on. And yeah, I suppose this is why what Troels presented had that part about, in certain circumstances, you could be seen just by existence to be luring bears. So it's in context, have you parked there because you're hoping the bear comes to you, or was it an accident? And I certainly have had a case where we were doing biosecurity and dry suit fitting and things when we were surprised by frost and a cub coming to the ship, just because we happened to be moored at the ice edge just to rest the crew. And so I suppose it's very much a case-by-case basis in those situations. Ida, yes.
Yes, just a short comment on that, as you say, because of course you can really look depending on where you park and everything, but you can also choose where do they park. Is it furthest in Dixonfjorden? Well, we know for sure it's a reason why you go there. Or do you park a little bit further out? Maybe it's possible also to do it. Like, so you can know a little bit also where do you choose to park. Is it, and if you're far north, maybe you go then 12 nautical miles somewhere around the land. I don't know. You can think a little bit of both ways of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point of view to take. Like, are we parking somewhere in order to see a bear, or are we parking somewhere in order to avoid disturbing a bear? Mørten, I'm very interested in your comments here, and I'm also curious if you feel like, are these new standards, new regulations, is this a good thing for polar bears?
Wow, that adds a lot. That last question adds a lot to what I was going to say. But let me start by asking a question. Does anybody have any more details except somebody was fined for parking at the ice edge? Does anybody know? I don't need a name of a ship or a company, but does anybody have the details, like what were they fined for and what were the circumstances? Or is this all something second, third hand and nobody here really knows?
So, oh, sorry again. So yeah, they had, of course, parked in by the ice, and it wasn't that they stood just there for one night. It wasn't just for 2 nights. They were waiting there quite long, and the bear came several times back and forth to that ship. So of course, yeah, that was the reason why they were fined. That was found out, that they were standing there waiting for it to come back and go away, come back, go away. That was the reason. And there was, again, not just one night. There was several nights at one place at the ice.
And they were, what were they charged with? What, fined for what?
Luring the bear. So that was the reason, again, which says that they were not allowed to. So they were luring it to wait for it to come to them. That was the reason, apparently. That's what I have read.
Okay. And I take it this was not in Eastfjorden?
Yes, it was.
It was in Eastfjorden. Okay. Okay. Well, we know a little bit more then. That's obviously some of the slides that Troels put up are quite shocking. This way that they are intending to interpret the law regarding what constitutes disturbance and what constitutes luring. My impression, I've read that whole L47 or whatever it's called several times. It's only in Norwegian, but I've read it several times. And one of the things that I'm unsure of, but maybe you're more sure, Troels, is that this is the interpretation they intend to have once this proposal becomes legislation. I think it's more them saying that this is how they intend to interpret in the future. But of course, the story of this fine already having been passed last year, I guess, indicates that they're already testing whether they can interpret these laws that harshly already now, even before that proposal has come through. Because as we know, the law right now says that what we're not allowed to do is to follow, lure, seek out polar bears in such a way as to cause danger or disturbance, danger to the bear or to people. And the whole intention with this proposition, or they focus very much in this proposition over 40, 50 pages on the idea that they want to take away the second half of that sentence so that it becomes 100% illegal to follow, lure, or seek out, regardless whether you disturb or not. So that's one of the things, one of the little tricks they want to add or actually subtract from the current law in order to make it much more difficult to view polar bears at all. And the other one, obviously, is this either 300 or 500 meter minimum distance limit, which they intend to pass from next year, which again would make it absolutely impossible to enjoy polar bears in Svalbard. And it was interesting in reading that law proposal in Norwegian, and I've also made some homemade translations into English of a couple of sentences, and one of them I'd like to read to all of you, because there is actually a direct quote in there from Sysselmesteren as a comment to the proposal, where the Sysselmesteren institution basically has said, or says, polar bear tourism is not wanted, and Sysselmesteren does not see any reason to change any wording in the proposal to ensure that this type of activity can continue. That's about as clear as you have ever heard authorities express what the real intent behind the proposal is. So basically what they're saying is they recognize that there is polar bear tourism and they want to destroy it completely. And this is the intention with these legislations. So there are two ways really that laws and regulations can be made. One is that they can be based on a reality. or they can be based in an agenda, a political agenda. If they're based in reality, usually there are facts that basically dictate a management decision. In other circumstances, there are management decisions made, and then they go looking for facts to back up those decisions afterwards. And the latter is the case in this proposal. They want to close down polar bear tourism, and then they look east, west, north, and south to try to find scientific or other justification for the proposals. And they basically have two angles. One is safety, and the other one is conservation, if you will. So concern for the polar bear and concern for safety. And in my opinion, both of those are easily shot down. If you look at the argumentations they have for both safety reasons and for polar bear conservation reasons, none of them add up to anything close to the need to close down polar bear tourism. Organized ship-based polar bear tourism as we conduct it, it's simply a matter of looking for justification to close this industry down and scrambling to argue with science and also with safety concerns to back it up. But there is no sense in it. I could speak on that for an hour. I won't do that now, but I've found at least 12 good points to basically shoot down both the safety concerns and the conservation concerns. So to answer your final question to me there, Alex, very briefly, I would say that there are absolutely no conservation issues between polar bears and polar bear well-being in Svalbard and organized ship-based tourism. It's bullshit. We are not harassing bears, we are not disturbing bears, and we are not causing the local polar bear population in Svalbard any harm. We are an industry that goes out of its way to do everything we can to not disturb polar bears, which does not mean that occasionally mistakes happen or occasionally somebody perhaps needs to be reined in. But 99.9% of us are out there because we love these animals and we want to respect these animals, and we do our utmost not to disturb them when we are operating. However, the scientific community operates on the exact opposite agenda. The whole goal with all the science, polar bear science and research that happens is to harass and disturb as much as possible. If you think about the philosophy behind the capture-recapture programs, the whole idea is to disturb and capture a polar bear as often as possible and as many as possible. That is the basis of the whole scientific research program, because there's no behavioral studies on the ground. It's all helicopter-based, and it's all about capturing and recapturing and taking samples. In other words, chasing the bears, sedating the bears, sampling the bears. And as we know, nobody in their right mind can argue that this is not directly invasive and negative to the overall polar bear population. But they're allowed to do that. They get exemptions and we don't. So it's very clear from this quote from Sysselmesteren that they basically want to shut polar bear tourism down. And that's where I stand on that.
Okay, thank you, Mørten. Troels, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, it was just to confirm that for those of you who find the document and try and can read Norwegian, check out page 16, where it is very clearly states that the current legislation means this. It's a document that's very difficult to read. If you're trying to translate it by Google Translate, be very, very careful, because it's a mix with different opinions, different proposals. It describes the hearing, the incoming hearing notes that have come in from various entities. It describes what the original proposal was and the reason why the original proposal was there. And then sort of the ministry overrules the whole thing in the end and saying, this is how we think it should be. And the ministry even go back on some of the original proposals. So it's a complicated document to read, especially if you just translate it via Google. But it is unfortunately the current legislation that has been interpreted this way that I presented. Yeah.
Thanks, Troels. Ida, I saw you nodding along with Mørten there. Do you have anything to add?
No, yeah, I was actually agreeing just a lot to it, that about especially what I talked about with the scientists and what they're doing. I've seen it myself as well, what they've been doing sometimes and how long they can chase the bear. And yeah, I don't really like it. And it's sometimes we have even companies that want us to work together with them and saying like, where have you seen the bears and where they are and what age and things. And then they want to go there and then they want to, yeah, mark them or anything. And for me, then I don't want to be part of actually giving that information because I don't want them to be more disturbed. Because I do feel, as Mørten a little bit say, if I'm coming there with two snowmobiles, two Zodiacs and driving there, and they come in with a helicopter, it's a massive difference. So of course that they are doing a lot more, in my way, think disturbance. And is it really that much more science that they need to do so much? And yeah, so yeah, just agreed on things because I've seen it too. And we had now the Sysselmann and Timmen that we always have here in Svalbard in February, when the Sysselmann is kind of telling us information about the season and everything. And I did have some questions about things like this that I wanted to know what, you know, they're building the science of these regulations they're putting in and where does the information go and things. And they don't have any answers. They don't know themselves. So yeah, Sysselmann is out there. We have been inspected full on, even this winter season. They're out in the field a lot and checking everything. It's almost like they're looking for something to find. So they will be out in the field. And as I say, if you would be moored up somewhere, maybe it's been super bad weather, you have to be furthest into the fjord. And then they're going to think, no, you are luring. So of course, and that they're going to think you are, and you have to almost prove that you maybe didn't, because this time you did it for maybe safety. So yeah, you need to be aware a little bit of if people are around, for sure.
Thanks. There was a question from an attendee whether this view of not wanting polar bear tourism is a view only of Sysselmesteren, or is that also a view of the people who live in Longyearbyen?
Yeah, I mean, it's for the people in Longyearbyen as well. I mean, they don't want any polar bear tourism either. I mean, we go on trips all the time to East Coast, yes, which is an area when we do have usually a lot of polar bears due to the sea ice is very thick there and good. And I mean, they come out there and they check us out looking. And if we have then been on a glacier, we're just doing a scout on the ice, anything, and yeah, if you saw a bear, then of course we can all of a sudden not go on the ice and making our normal tour. But sometimes we're driving past by an iceberg, and all of a sudden behind that iceberg there was a polar bear. And if they saw that wrongly, then that can go bad for us as well. And it's really sad. I feel that really sad because that's not how we operate. We have not disturbed them at all. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ida. I think we'll come back to our approach to wildlife later in the webinar, but I'd like to move on now to Greenland, Troels, if you have any updates for us there. But I do have one more question for you. Is the OVRAT still operational for guides?
Yes. Yes, OVRAT is definitely operational for guides. You need to be sure you downloaded the new version. That is the version that came out just prior to last season. If it doesn't work for some reason, the one you have, then you need to get the new one. You need to contact your employer again to get the link or get the information from me or from us to download it. But it is there. There are a few new things in there. There are some shape files, polygon for protected areas, for example, the 20-kilometer zone, the no-go zone, the slow-down zones in Greenland, etc., etc., etc. So we're trying as best we can to keep as many people informed, so we avoid these, which is we certainly interpret as just mistakes, innocent mistakes made just because you weren't aware. And hopefully by using the tool every now and then you you can get an just update yourselves on where what is, and hopefully we can avoid these silly things that was never an intentional thing. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Troels. Yeah, for anyone who isn't yet using OVRAT as a guide, I strongly recommend it. There's a lot of amazing information in there, and I've definitely stopped myself from making a mistake before just by checking OVRAT before I head out the door. Okay, so let's move on now, Troels, to Greenland. Are there any updates that guides should be aware of there?
Generally, not very many. We're waiting for this. The Greenland authorities are preparing a new tourism act. And this is something that's going to be presented here in April, we've been informed. We haven't seen it yet. We don't know exactly what it entails. The details of it, we have no idea what that is, what those may be. We know that there's a plan that there's going to be zoning proposals, possibly similar to the ones we see in the Scoresbysund and south of that area, with possible no-go zones, possible slowdown zones. Where those may be proposed, we don't know. They have been in touch with all the municipalities and are leaning strongly on local advice for these things. We've been informed. It is something that may go very fast. It is proposals that are going to be finished and completed by the autumn session of Parliament in Greenland this year. And as these are changes from an operator perspective that have come in very fast for this year, for this season. There are some passenger taxes and things like that have come in overnight almost. It's really within a couple of months. And it is very likely that the regulations that we have yet to see the first proposal of will also be installed for 2025. However, we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be everything, of course, either. So there may very well be challenges there. There is also polar bear issues in Greenland. The law that came out last year suggests that you have to have a locally authorized guide, polar bear guide on board in order to approach the 200 meters. It's a little bit difficult to interpret this law when you look at it. We hope that the new Tourism Act will clarify that a notch so that we can understand it a little bit better. Because as far as I am informed, we don't know where to find, or operators where they can find locally authorized polar bear guides, etc., etc. So the authorization, I don't think exists actually. So it's a little bit tricky, the whole thing there. So other than that, the changes are mainly operator related, and it's probably not affecting guides. It's sort of behind the scenes, such as this passenger tax and things like that. The biggest thing will be again for next year, presumably. We'll have a lot of things to look at next year, both in Greenland.
Question, Troels?
Yeah, sure, one.
This tourism act, you mentioned the fall session of the Greenland Parliament. First of all, do you know when that fall session is? Secondly, do you think whatever they pass, that they would pass it for immediate action or from next year?
This is like speculation from my side, so please don't quote me on it.
You're being recorded.
Yeah, no, I realized that was what I meant. Glimpse in the eye, a little tweak in the eye. No, if you look at what has been passed from late last year, enforced for this season, it was also passed in the autumn session of Parliament last season, or in 2023, and went into place for 1 January 2024. So I think it's safe to say that parts, or if not all, of whatever the proposal will end up being will be also put into place from 1 January 2025, just as the Svalbard regulations with the the 43 sites, etc. That's already been passed. Yeah.
I would like to add to what you said, Troels, that I have been reading what I've been able to find on polar bears viewing in Greenland. And my clear understanding is that basically it says that we are not allowed to watch polar bears unless we have a so-called authorized local guide. We are basically not allowed to conduct polar bear tourism, and looking at a polar bear equals polar bear tourism. So to do polar bear tourism, you have to have one of these local authorized guides. And as you say, that is difficult to find. So in other words, you're back to option one, which is don't look at polar bears. And my understanding is that the text actually says that we're not allowed to be closer than 200 meters to a polar bear. And basically, if we see a polar bear, we're not allowed to stop and watch it unless we have that non-existent authorized guide on board. So we cannot stop the ship because we are looking at a polar bear. We have to keep going if we chance see a polar bear off the side of the ship.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Jason, before we move on to Arctic Canada, I don't know if you would have any commentary on that principle of, instead of just foreign companies, as in companies from outside Greenland, staffed entirely from people from outside Greenland coming in, a requirement for there to be people from Greenland there. Do you think that's a good thing for Greenlandic communities?
No, I think it's a little bit more complex than saying yes or no to that. As we see in Canada, where it is required to have Inuit on board for a number of the permits that you would need to obtain. The purpose of having an Inuk on board then is almost overlooked, or that's when you get into areas of tokenism, when it becomes a checkbox that you have to have somebody rather than trying to incorporate them in the team just because, in my opinion, it would be a better run program in the regions that you're running. But I do also, and maybe this comes a little bit from operating in Canada, where we don't have though the industry in Canada is growing very quickly, we're still very far behind in terms of numbers per day of ships in any of the areas that we're traveling. And as I'm listening, when we talk about disturbance, and I know many operators, I know our own operation is built to be very respectful, and I think our whole industry reflects that. But when we do get into, operator stopping in a stop, so one stop may have a ship every day, and then we may be covering large areas where there's a ship every day, and it not comes outside of our own operations and is reflected on the industry as a whole. And I don't think we know what impact that has in terms of even bears avoiding places now that might be heavily visited. And then I was also curious, and Graham, maybe you're a good person to ask, if law interpretation and policy interpretation is built into the training now of PTGA, which seems to be a required skill now.
Yes, I agree, and listening to both Troels and Mørten and Edith throwing stuff in there, jeepers, the tricky factor of trying to interpret these things. When these laws come out in the somewhat sovereign language of the places, and then without the immediate English translation, seems to open a whole can of worms just in its own right, without all the other political issues. But yes, Jason, there does seem to be the need for a whole skill set for traveling across the Arctic and interpreting these things.
But maybe to more directly answer that question, Alex, in my program, I run the Nalunexi training program here in Canada, where I train Inuit guides to join the industry. The purpose of that is kind of multifaceted, but there's an extreme underrepresentation of Inuit working in our industry. And you can kind of understand it in the early days, but now it's turned into something that's, I think, a little bit embarrassing for the industry. And I think the more that we can incorporate locals into our operations, you know, outside of economic benefit to the places, which is why you see a lot of communities now that just don't see the benefit. They only see the negative impacts of our industry as a whole. And those impacts are only heightened as our industry grows. We have to figure out a way that having those people on board is just as ingrained in us as our respect for wildlife, as wanting to foster the places we're visiting as well.
Thank you, Jason. I know Adventure Canada is an operator for whom that principle is very much built into how you operate in the Arctic. Graham, you had a comment.
Yeah, for Jason, so what you say there about the underrepresentation being embarrassing, where do we, you know, where will the incentive, I guess, or the movement come from for that? Do you think that will come from government to provide schemes and programs for Inuit, or is it going to have to come from the ground and move out from there?
I think one, in running the Nalunaq program, it's quite obvious it's not going to be a quick fix that we can turn around and now we can say that everyone's doing it properly. There is a lot of, you know, cultural dimensions to understanding that don't quite line up, and those are not things that are fixed in generations. But I don't quite know where the best solution is. Right now, with the Nalunaq program, it's been picked up by the government of Nunavut, who is trying to respond to the growing industry. I think there's industry interest in having more Inuit on board. And I should say that that's quite obvious that interest is there, but how to best work together and having true understandings of skills and competencies outside of what the industry regularly acknowledges. These are things that are working processes on shifting how people actually think is maybe the way too oversimplified way of saying it.
Thank you. Mørten.
Yes, Jason, one comment and one question. The question is, are you cooperating with the Greenland side in this program? Because I can see that there's much more cruise tourism in Greenland and maybe also more expedition cruise tourism. And obviously from the Greenland side, there have now been basically regulations requiring local people on board. So perhaps there are some things that could inspire you by working directly with Greenlanders on this topic.
No, and it's been a conversation that we've started. I think we want to see how Nalunaq in Nunavut pans out. It's quite small scale, only 12 participants a year that we can have right now. But I've already been in contact with Campus Kujalleq and Greenland Tourism to see if this is something that we could introduce on a larger scale in Greenland as well. But those are just, I'd say, concepts that are discussed rather than there's any formal plan.
Okay. Well, good luck with it. My comment was basically, you said it might take generations to align the cultural differences. I just want to encourage you to believe that it could go very, very quickly. I think sometimes there are sort of explosive evolutions can happen as soon as people start talking together. There doesn't have to be generations between coming together. I think it can go very fast. I think what you're doing sounds amazing.
I have to be hopeful. But it's no, it's very interesting, is because some of these policies are put into place in order to service the people from those regions, but often, and again, we're getting into policy interpretation, they don't often meet that requirement without true meaning behind why they're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that, Jason. So I think that's a nice segue into asking you what anything guides should be aware of in terms of changes in Arctic Canada. Maybe not just next season, but last season as well. I know last season was my very first in Arctic Canada, and a few of the more experienced guides, I think, felt a little bit shocked by the way things were different.
Yeah, it is a little bit shocking. And what's new in Canada was my topic, and I was trying to think how I could narrow that down a little bit, other than talking about the disastrous Toronto Maple Leafs loss last night. There's not a whole lot new in terms of the Canadian operations. Again, you're starting to see a lot more from Transport Canada on implementing long-standing policies. And now we're entering into how those policies are interpreted, which has caused a lot of chaos. One, Transport Canada is only really becoming aware of our industry over the last few years, and they're trying to come up now with policies that will, in general, make us safer. But as any of you who operate in Canada know, it's just becoming more of an exercise in paperwork. So the biggest one, which has probably impacted us all, is the deviation requests and approval processes, where now anytime you want to come off course, you have to request permission from Transport Canada to change course and wait for that approval to come back. Currently, Transport Canada wasn't staffed large enough to accommodate our industry, so there was many delays, which caused then chaos amongst itineraries, where we're all trying to work together to not pile up into the same spot. I will say that it's a working process. I think Transport Canada is aware. There's lots of talks happening with AECO, with operators that are working there, and Transport Canada is becoming fairly open, and I think that it's a work in progress. I think we're going to find the way that it can work. But currently, anyone who's coming into Canada, just be ready for some interesting itinerary issues. We're starting to see a lot more as well in the Canadian Border Service Agency, which compared to any other place has quite antiquated system. They require a face-to-face interaction in order to clear customs. Most operators are now coming in through Talahotobiamanga, or the Lancaster Sound Marine Protected Area, into Mitimatalik, or Pond Inlet. Traffic in Mitimatalik has been a long-standing issue. The community itself feels they have way too many vessels and that they can't accommodate. However, with our growing industry and the way that CBSA operates, most vessels are forced to Mitimatalik in order to clear customs. And anyone who's not aware, Mitimatalik has a very intense narwhal hunting area, and they're quite protective of it. And there's also a mine where container ships are going back and forth all season long as well, which is a cause for huge concern for the community. There are alternatives in Grise Fjord However, all of these stops for CBSA are cost recovery. So we as an industry are covering the costs. And I don't know if any of you have booked a flight to Grace Fjord, but it's rather intense. And the hotel is not approved for government officials to stay there. So it's alternatively, Qeqertaqsuaq, which is a community further south, they are more welcoming to having vessels come and stop. And you're seeing some operators move from Mitimatalik to Qeqertaqsuaq to kind of ease the burden on the community. There are a number of areas along that East Baffin coast that Clyde River, the community of Clyde River, has requested be no-go areas, which there is a lot of confusion in the industry right now because the request was made a few years ago. And I think the industry sees those as annual reviews. I don't think the community sees it as an annual review of those stops. So, and Troels, I believe AECO has all that documentation and has made the email out to the industry as well.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of things going on and communicating, working with Canada and Canadian authorities, trying to lift the burden slightly, if ever possible, on the mountains of paperwork and the permits that are required. It's rather intense, if I can quote a friend. Maybe if I may just add a little thing, that if you're expedition leading or AELing in the Canadian waters and you're moving up the coast on the Atlantic coast, if you have a chance to just check the OBRET for these wildlife marine protected areas, because there's a couple of them that are actually sort of sticking out off the coast, and if you go through them, without a permit, you have a problem, or your captain and your employer will have a problem. And we actually had a few of those last year, and unfortunately, and it's one of those very silly small things that, and yes, the mariners should refer to the notices for mariners that are issued with all these things. But should you notice that, the overnight sail passes through one of these, maybe you can just go to the bridge and just make sure that they know. The thing is that these shape files, these areas, are not delimited in the ECDIS files and the charts, the sea charts. So if you don't know from this, or don't remember from reading the notices for mariners, you may actually just pass through, and then you end up in a little situation. So
yeah,
elaborate on that one, Jason.
Yeah, no, and it identifies another operational challenge is a lot of these restricted areas, no-go zones, they're not all managed by one particular authority. For example, the fjords on East Baffin is a request from the community of Clyde River. The no-go zone in Eclipse Sound and Navy Board Inlet is a no-go zone requested by the community of Mitimatalik. There are a few federal ones, and you're talking about Ningongovik or Isabella Bay Marine Protected Area, I believe. And then also the Moran Point, which I know many of you have visited, which is right next to Dundas Harbor, is a no-go area for the Department of Archaeology, who are currently doing some work there this summer. And then also Fort Ross, which was a very popular stop just before you go through Bellot Strait. The community of Tuluyok has requested that no longer be visited. And the archaeology department is not issuing permits there for this coming season. And I think what we're seeing, a lot of the unlike other operational areas in the Arctic Canada, I don't think is going to have the same, what's the word? For anybody that can read my mind. I think there's a much more fear of our industry and the impacts it will have. And they're not going to be as accommodating in terms of the numbers that we see in other Arctic regions. Right now in Canada, the expedition cruise is growing quite rapidly. And it's putting a lot of stress and tension, I think, on the relationships with communities there, which I do find fairly worrying for the future of our industry in this area.
Thank you, Jason. I think it's a very salient point, and I think leads us on to what we can do as guides to, I guess, produce as little impact as possible on these places we go and to make the most of our time there. So first of all, this is something I think that would be most helpful for the newer guides who are listening now, which is how we can improve our knowledge of the Arctic regions we're guiding in. And so maybe I could ask Ben initially for any particularly good resources you know of, other than the OVRAT, of course.
Yeah, sure thing, Alex. Yeah, other than the OVRAT, I mean, there's actually some really good kind of contemporary resources available for the Arctic, particularly around polar bears. We've spoken to Mørten's got a couple of books available. I actually had a list which I've left in the other room here. But, you know, Rini has got a really good book out. Ian Sterling's got some good literature floating about for people who want to kind of diversify what they're looking at. Mørten will interject. I forget all his last name, but he's also got some good literature around on that front. And then I think particularly for the new guides, really trying to tune into the resources that we have buried within our expedition teams, you know, the staff that have been around for, you know, several seasons or more, and just trying to tune into that. I think, to speak more broadly, Alex, I think there's a real challenge in our industry to maximize our impact on the guests that we're fortunate to sail with, and who, you know, put us where we want to be in these places. You know, it's kind of easy to spin the wheels a little bit as a guide and meet your, you know, your employers' needs, but I think as an industry we can seek to extend and move beyond, you know, the creating ambassadors, and really try and, you know, foster guardianship and really own that. And I think an underutilized skill set is probably the soft skills side of things. You know, thematic interpretation has been battered around in the industry vocab for quite a while, but I'm yet to see a lot of people pick that up and run with it, you know, because I think that's really impactful. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I actually think, you know, and I guess I'm switching hats a little bit here, to, you know, from an expedition leader to I guess an instructor at the Expedition Guides Academy. We are seeing like ultra motivated people looking to enter the industry. And yeah, it's actually really inspiring to see the level of professionalism that newer guides are bringing to the industry, and, you know, how driven they are to seek out information and resources, and how open they are, you know, to new ideas. So you can see Graham's got his hand up there.
Yeah, Ben, I will echo that from the PTGA's point of view. That the number of new members we have joining, who are wanting to get into the industry, but not just wanting to, you know, I instantly want a job, but with full integrity, they want to join and understand how to be competent, and how to be professional, and how to be, you know, a professional polar guide. And I agree with you, Ben, that it is inspiring when these people prepared to come into the industry and do the hard work to get to be a decent level to get a job, rather than just someone who's keen to get some photographs of a polar bear. And I just wanted to throw in there, I know we're pushing on in time, but just listening to Troels, to everybody across the Arctic, from points that Ida had raised in Svalbard through Greenland and onto Canada, I just a very short distillation. It seemed to me that if you were an expedition leader or anyone, or even a senior guide in charge of an excursion or in charge of a trip, it seems to me that possibly not a new skill, but something to be really conscious of moving forward is your answers to what is happening behind you. So to put that in another language, in my experience, often as an expedition leader, you're looking forward in the trip. What are we going to do tonight? What are we going to do tomorrow? And all that sort of thing. Whereas now it seems with these new regulations, the difficulty in interpreting these things, that a key skill and something that really needs to be in your repertoire is answers to what happened behind you, so that if you get that call from whatever government that you're dealing with, that you have good answers, so that you haven't crossed through that area unconsciously, or that if a bear arrived, that you've already formulated a plan for what your answers are to mitigate misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what you were doing when you were trying to do your best, but these damn critters just turn up out of nowhere, or whatever else there. So just something that seemed like a distillation across the Arctic region that we've just heard in the last while.
Mørten, you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I have many comments, but I'll start with the last one, which came from what Graham just said. I think this whole idea of looking back, rather than always be looking forward, is something that it cued me to say the same, but at another level. I think slowing down is one of the ways that we as guides can be a better version of ourselves, and also be better guides, and also deliver a better product. The whole industry, the whole world, the whole human world is just going into a mode of faster and faster and faster, and everything is developing towards been there, done that, took the selfie, tick the box. And I think the only chance we really have, or one chance that we really have to improve not just our product and our delivery and the experience of our guests, but also the outcome of everything we do, is to push back against this development, and basically in every way, in every aspect, both personally, internally, but also when we interact as guides, to try to slow down. And so first of all, of course, that makes mistakes less likely to happen if we slow down, but also it gives everybody a chance to actually be in the moment more, rather than be already past it while you're there. And it also gives the opportunity to dive deeper into immersion of the nature experience, including maybe studying behavior more, rather than just ticking off a list of species we've seen and which ones we haven't seen yet, but actually getting to appreciate the wildlife and the wilderness instead of just passing through it. So this whole idea of looking behind, I think, can be taken to that level as well, not just to be prepared for whatever lawsuit might be coming up, because the authorities interpret laws differently, but also to be improving our product and improving the best version of ourselves in the face of our clients. So that was the point I wanted to make to what Graham said there. Regarding resources, perhaps Ben doesn't feel that he could mention it because he works directly with him, but a very important resource, in my opinion, regarding polar bear safety and polar bear understanding is Nikita Ovsyannikov and his whole philosophy of non-lethal self-determination or self-defense against polar bears, and education in that respect. And I know that through Ben and the Academy, it's possible to learn from Nikita, both directly and indirectly. He's put some things into writing, and other times he actually leads courses himself. And I think it's very, very important also for all the new people in the industry to understand that we need to get away from this weapon-based, fear-based approach to polar bears and move towards coexistence with them. And that comes from better understanding of what they're like as creatures and how we need to behave in order to avoid negative confrontations with them. And my last comment I just want to make to mostly to Jason. I think it's sad to hear about the local communities' tendency to react negatively to the industry, and some of them actually just wanting ships to stay off. I had that very same experience close to me many years ago when I was coming to Itokotomit in East Greenland at a time when the local community was actually getting more and more hostile towards our visits. And what happened there is that locals, together with the industry and together with a very inspired tourist management leader, local person, created a package of ways that the locals would interact with the ships and the ships would interact with the community when they visited. And this actually turned the atmosphere around. So from becoming more and more hostile to having visits, they actually became more and more welcoming in the years following that. So there might be inspiration to pick up there if you want to make the contact with Itokotomit in East Greenland.
Yeah, and maybe I should clarify. I don't know if negative is the word. Even if you go to Metimatalik right now, it still would remain extremely welcome. I think it's the tension. It's that it is, as the industry grows, that tension is going to grow, and at some point soon in Canada, we can be unsustainable, even though it might be far less than other places. And can I add something to that last point? And this is a point that I recognized fairly quickly in our industry is there is almost a flooding of guides who are extremely passionate and can learn very quickly, but don't generally have a lot of experience in the places. And one of the things that we hear quite often from Inuit in Canada who have a hard time getting a position because they're not a performer, or they don't know how to drum dance or something like this, and they see the expedition teams who are built of Europeans, South Africans, Australians, Americans, in roles of polar bear monitors and Zodiac operators. And I think that's one thing. Through the Nalunaq Seed program, we're trying to address some of the barriers to Inuit in those roles. But I hope also to work with the industry soon on kind of recognizing existing skills and knowledge, and I see no reason why we can't have bear monitors or Zodiac operators who are built primarily of Inuit from these regions. But it's not a common practice, as it is much harder to incorporate in existing business strategies.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. Thank you. Just following on from Mørten's comments here, there was an interesting post on Boat People asking how we justify the existence of our industry. And Mørten actually made, I thought, a thoughtful response. And if it's okay, Mørten, I'm just going to read out a small part of that, where you wrote that the products focus forevermore on ticking boxes and providing low-grade entertainment, with the nature outside fading away into a backdrop for senseless self-indulgence on board. To the extent the nature is briefly visited, it becomes an object to consume, along with all the other consumption that the entire voyage is built around, rather than a prize in itself, a reality to be in awe of and to immerse into. And my question for the panelists is, how do we as guides try to make that transition from consumption, where we're just trying to tick every species of penguin, we're just trying to get a photograph of a polar bear, to one where it's a pilgrimage that we go to? And it's easy to feel powerless as a guide, but as guides, I think we do have power, because part of the expectation people have when they come on a trip is based on reading about people's experiences in places like Facebook, and we're the ones who deliver those experiences. And of course, guides have created many organizations, PTGA being a prime example of that, founded by guides, run by guides, Polar Tourism Guides, the Polar Citizen Science Collective, another one, also in the Olsson network in Arctic Canada, which I'm sure Jason is aware of as well. All of these, as I'm aware, are run by guides. So Ida, maybe would you be able to have some comments here on how we could maybe adjust how we run these trips? I thought you made some nice comments on, choosing where to park so you don't disturb a bear rather than you try to achieve seeing a bear. Like, how do we approach making it less about what champagne is served on board and what species we can tick, and more about actually appreciating where people are, and in doing so, influence them to tell people you have to go on this pilgrimage to be in nature?
I think, of course, then one of the start thing is a lot from the media and from marketing, how it's being presented, of course, to people already from the beginning, so they know what they kind of booked, what trip they have been booking, of course. And on board, I think it's already from the beginning very important, especially as an expedition leader, how we present the reason why you go here. As you say, like when I present, I talk a lot about the history. Of course, I have passion for history, so I talk a lot about that, about Svalbard, and then I try to go to places where then I can connect these things that I maybe told them or want to show them, and then they're getting maybe a different feeling of it as well. And again, I think a lot with this thing about having a knowledge about things connected with where to go and what to do, and how we can give the guests that, I think have a lot in common. The more knowledge about areas you have, knowledge about actually what you can see and explaining things, and of course I think the combining can be easier than to explain to guests why we should maybe I don't know what to say, but how we can get them to want to see other things as well, and make a story maybe of the trip. That's how I focus a lot, like starting at the day and making story a little of the whole voyage, and that way maybe they kind of get into that as well. And it's not just about, we're gonna see the bear, we're gonna see that walrus, and we're gonna try see a fox, and we try see a reindeer. No, maybe we make the story, and starting with going to an area about the whaling, where we talk about actually how Svalbard, for example, started, about how the whalers came up here. And then maybe we go to a place where they have trapping, because that's the next part that started happening with the trapping. And then maybe you're going to see more about also the wildlife that they did trap, or also then what now we've stopped hunting and that actually here, and that we should then protect, and so we can see them in a good way. And then maybe you finish it off and then in one of the towns or whoever, and talk about the mining or anything. But you make a story and kind of maybe can get them in a different way. Of course, that's my way, but it's also depending what kind of trip. Is it a photo charter? Maybe they don't want that. So it depends a little, of course, on the trip. But that's the way I maybe would have done it a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like an example of thematic interpretation, maybe. I don't know if Graham or Ben want to make any further comments on that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm just going to echo what Ida has said. And I think it requires kind of a multi-pronged approach in a way. Like, I do feel like the marketing side of things is really what sets the scene, and I've often seen it as problematic, speaking as a expedition staff member. for a long time, and it's hard to get the the marketing teams on a similar wavelength to the expedition guides. I do believe that is a challenge that we have in industry. I think it's good with some of the conversations that we're having. I mean, you brought up Mørten's input, which was actually really good. I mean, let's be honest, his comments are always excellent and thought-provoking. Thank you, Mørten. But I do think, yeah, and again, I think it's important that we take hold of the narrative as soon as people get on board. I think it's important for both expedition leadership, and by that I mean the ELs and AELs, but all staff to have a similar vision with this. I certainly tried that a few years ago on a ship where we tried to build like a singular narrative arc, and then have our different presenters kind of step in and add part of that story. And I do feel passionately about this, and I think that's where we need to be focusing as an industry, particularly if polar bears are going to be harder and harder to be around, which is kind of what it feels like. I think it's really important that we focus on that. And I mean, an example would be in Svalbard late season. You go ashore for a walk, and it's pretty easy to kind of set the scene. The operations I've worked in, we call it, creating tundra detectives, where you go for a walk and have a theme in mind, and you're pointing out the minutiae in the tundra, the canopy layer all of a centimeter or two high. But again, I think guides need to have the tools, and they need to have the time to do this. And at the moment, guides are paid to turn up and guide from the start of the contract to the end of the contract. But there's little motivation to go and be better than that, and that's kind of down to the person. So I think the industry, we can challenge ourselves to be more professional in that instance. I think companies can create space where guides, can have time on board to figure out these narrative arcs, and like Mørten said, slow down and really pick up on the stories there. I could talk for an hour or more on all of this sort of stuff, but I know Graham's got a point or two. So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for us as an industry to do a lot more.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, that's really good. I just see in the Q&A Kevin Morgan talking about Lost Wallet. So if anyone's interested in Lost Wallet, there is a PTGA Guides Inside video on that. And on that subject, it sounds like there's a few potential guides inside for the future on things like creating a narrative for the trip. Before we move on to our final section, I just quoted Mørten, so I think I'd like to give Mørten an opportunity to say a few comments on this subject.
Okay, thank you. I won't say very much because I do feel I said a lot of what I have to say on the subject, but yeah, I feel that as guides, we're sitting here today in a forum of guides, although we don't know everybody who might be listening in as well, who might not be guides. But generally, we're here as guides, all of us, whether we are new guides or experienced guides, or sometimes expedition leaders, sometimes lower rank guides. All of us, we have limited influence on marketing, as has been mentioned, and on the companies, many of which are getting bigger and bigger and becoming corporate entities rather than small companies where there's an intimate relationship or even personal acquaintance between office staff and field staff. And the larger these entities get, and also the larger the ships get, and the larger the groups of passengers get for each voyage, the more the intimacy is lost, and also the influence of the people at the bottom of the rungs, which, not counting crew, is essentially the guides. But I feel that one of the ways we can, when we are in there, is that we can improve things is by slowing down, as I said, and really, if we ourselves are on board and doing the job because we love being immersed in the nature, then we can help the guests who are there for shorter time than us usually also at least get a little bit of that feeling of immersing themselves in the nature, rather than focusing on polar plunges and continental landings and circle crossings and the next glass of champagne. And you know, I've always been an advocate of canceling a recap if nature is happening, rather than forcing recap, because it's the program beyond before anything else. However, I also want to add that there's a limit to what we can do. And one of the ways I think we can push back is just refusing to take the jobs that are the lowest grade of what is offered in the industry. So basically not to allow ourselves to keep slipping down this ladder towards Disney-style entertainment, but simply at some point get off that ladder and say, hey, I don't want to be part of this. And if that entails moving out of the industry, or moving to another company, or moving to smaller ships, or whatever might be the solution for the individual, then I think we should encourage each other to do that in order to maintain our personal integrity.
Thank you, Mørten. Yeah, and hopefully enough guides have the luxury of doing that. I know I said I was about to move on, but I'm actually a little bit curious about Jason's opinion on what we're discussing here from the Canadian perspective, because certainly my time working in Canada, I found myself surprised by what I really got out of it versus what I expected to get out of it. I found I got a lot out of the culture side of it, where I was expecting more to enjoy the history and the wildlife. So Jason, I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, no, I think that's generally the case. I think the beauty in travel is finding the thing that you didn't know was there, rather than, and I think a number of people have referred to the checkbox. And I think that we see a lot more travelers, and I'll say this is probably across our industry, coming, I won't say for the wrong reasons, but maybe they don't quite have the skill to find the right reason. And I do think that is a product of the growth of our industry, in the competition, in the I think the vessels now you see are much more of an attractant to people than the programs or the guides. And I don't know, maybe we just have to make people less comfortable.
I think you'd find a lot of guides who would agree with you on that. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on. We can keep this pretty short here, because I realize we're over 90 minutes already. But there's been a lot of talk about near misses, incidents, and reporting. And so I'm curious to hear from Troels and also from Graham what the industry is doing to help record and learn from these incidents. Because certainly, while we understand that operators want to have a certain degree of privacy, those of us who are guides, we need to hear what happened to avoid making the mistakes of the past. So Troels, I don't know if you have any comments on that, and Graham as well.
Yeah, I can try. It's what, as you mentioned, it's not all easy for operators to share everything they do or have done. What we have in the AECO framework is that operators are to report incidents. We call it incident reporting. There is a form to fill out, and we encourage to also give us information about near misses and things like that, and not only, you know, grounding, as we just saw the other day in Svalbard. We try and use this internally so that the operators are informed, and the operators will, that's the intention at least, I believe, to then have to spread the word and in their operations, in their own operation, on how they've learned from these things that we pick up. It's something that's discussed in a closed forum at the AGM normally, and we not too much more we do than just really hope and encourage operators to bring it forward and include lessons learned in the operational, the SOPs, and etc. we're trying it with our observations as well. Our observation scheme is picking up much better than it has ever done in the last couple of years, and we're working to improve that dramatically still. And this is also where we're going to put in lessons learned, be it marketing, because we also look at marketing material. We have marketing guidelines, which should hopefully address some of the concerns that have also been put forward here. To put on these lessons learned from the observations to hopefully get this implemented with the operators.
Okay, thank you, Troels. Graham, do you have anything to add to that?
It's complex and it's tricky. You know, I will say, and it's a challenge to the trade associations, that yes, we know as guides that that's how things are supposed to be done according to the operators. My challenge is that it's still not good enough. There's not a chance that we know, because of the interest of PTGA, that guides are not getting the delivery or the distillation of these events in a way that is helpful, and what you probably referred to, Alex, where, you know, we want to know, not so we can point the finger or blame anybody, but so that we can learn and not walk into the trap if it's a bigger incident, or understand what might be going on in terms of collective causal factors that may be leading the industry or guides to, you know, some bigger outcome. And I think, you know, I feel that's really important. I will say that I understand the trade associations also may have great intent and intention with this, but they are also hamstrung, because without reporting, even with my challenge to do more in this area, that they may not be getting the information as well. It's tricky. You know, we get a lot of feedback. For anyone listening who, if you don't get our newsletter, it's well worth it. Our most popular column in there is our Guano Happens, which is shared incidents. Some of them may be very historic and makes them largely safer for us to share learned lessons from those things without getting into difficulty with this area. But we're seeing more and more guides who are frustrated by the fact that they see poor performance in particular companies or with guides, and they know that they're not going to get a hearing by going to their operator, who is then supposed, you know, is supposed to be incumbent on them to report it to the trade association to be disseminated, but they know that that's not going to happen. And so they come to us, and we're stuck in between a rock and a hard place to make that information available. But then we get in trouble because you know, because it's difficult for us to share that information without contravening or upsetting what the trade association and the operators are supposed to do. So it's an ongoing process. I don't have any answers other than, at the moment, the safe ground seems to be, and this seems to be a day of interpretations. Interpreting near misses, you know, a good thing to share, and you're welcome to share it with the PTGA, and we can share those things with guides in our own language, in our particular style, which is, as you know, built for guides and provides information. We're not just interested in the data or the data, but we're interested in looking at how this can help guides develop, and then having those narratives there. And so that's as far as I can go on it. You know, put the challenge out there. I think the whole industry is way behind. You know, even, you know, I know we're not as big as, you know, some manufacturing industry or anything like that. My experience in this space is that it's inevitable that we have to go this way. But I believe, and even from my involvement with other outdoor instruction and outdoor guiding associations, the polar tourism industry is way behind in this area in terms of sharing, and that having a conduit to get that information from incidents to the guides, who are the important coalface and sort of front-facing people in making the next decision. And I believe we have to get better at it.
Thank you, Graham. Appreciate that a lot. So we're going to move on to our Q&A now. We just have a couple of questions, and I think this first one would be for Troels, asking about Svalbard regulations and asking what exemptions are in place or not for different guide requirements. For example, the D5L. And is that the same for all, or is it different depending on operators, guides, ship, etc.? I think there's a little bit of confusion about what qualifications people need to have and what guide standards might be coming.
I can certainly understand the confusion. Excuse me. For the 2024 season, as 23 and 22, we still have the less than 12 or the small boat exemptions in place from the Norwegian Maritime Authority, and part of those exemptions is the requirement for a specific license, boat license. So there's no change from last year. The interesting bit is that the Norwegian Maritime Authority have moved it forward to become law, but these exemptions, this exemption scheme that has been in place for so long, this is made for safety reasons from their part. We've been heavily involved in discussing this with them and agree on the exemption scheme and so forth. However, trying to move this to become an actual law and not just an exemption scheme proved difficult for the Norwegian Maritime Authority, and I believe it was blocked by the Climate and Environmental Ministry, one of the ministries, due to conservation concerns. So slightly interesting that a safety law can be blocked for such reasons. The thing is that if there was no exemption scheme in place for the operators, and that means you're as guides are under the umbrella of the operators, if they apply for the exemption and get it, you guys are also covered. Then you're actually in for a really serious bit of certification in terms of boat driving. You need a 5DSL, I think, actually, a yacht certification and a Norwegian yacht certification. And it's only a Norwegian certification that is valid. So thankfully, we still have the exemption scheme in place.
Okay, and we expect how long
big,
and we're expecting that to stay in place?
Uncertain. We have been informed that it's in place for 2024. So we're uncertain what's going to happen for 2025. We simply don't know. But I mean, the good thing, I guess, is that it's been an exemption that has been in place for 3 or 4 years now. So we can be hopeful.
Thank you.
But we don't know.
There was a question whether Ben could provide a list of those knowledge resources, book names and authors to attendees as a follow-up. So perhaps actually Ben, Ida and Mørten, you might be able to put together a list for us of your favorite resources for the Arctic. And maybe Jason, you could add on some Canadian Arctic stuff for us as well.
Sure. Can I add something to that last?
Yes.
And it's probably irrelevant, but I have had 2 operators that were a little bit surprised by the knowledge. So specifically around guide certifications in the Torngat Mountains National Park in Labrador, for anyone planning on operating there, the bear guards have to be Nunatsev or Nunavik beneficiaries, and they have to have a polar bear guard training certificate, which is offered by Bear Safe Inc. in Nunatsev. There are no exceptions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it looks like our final question, and so this is something maybe everyone will have comments on, and it's going to be hard to ask, which is, will this industry still exist, especially looking at the polar bear rules in 10 years from now? Who wants to try to take that?
You kind of got 50-50 chances of getting in.
I can say something, I guess. I can give it a shot. I think yes, but I think the industry is in general, and that includes everyone working in the industry, guides, operators, everybody, will have to adopt to a new reality. We're looking into a less freedom, if you like, of more regulation, and we have to adopt to that reality. And if we can adopt, I think we can also manage. But of course, some of the things that have been said also tonight about how we can approach as guides, how guides can approach the whole storytelling theme, it's not making it easier to cut down the number of sites that you can visit, such as has happening from 2025 in Svalbard. The story is going to be harder to tell because you can visit less and less sites, and depending on how that pans out and the numbers and so on that will still operate and go, you know, it's going to be pretty busy. So adaptation to a new reality is paramount, and if that happens, then yes.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I'm not sure the whole world will exist in 10 years. The way things are going.
Can see you're not an optimist.
I'm a realist. I would like to just mention that there are all of these new regulations that I talked about earlier, and my interpretation of why they're being put in place, and the argumentation that it's for safety reasons and it's for conservation reasons. It all falls to the ground. There was a really interesting article in Svalbardposten maybe a month and a half ago, where it was documented that out of 200 applications to be exempt from the environmental regulations and to be given permission to fly, including flying in the national park areas of Svalbard, the Norwegian Polar Institute were granted permission in 150 cases out of 200 applications. Jason Roberts, who wanted to fly very close to Longyearbyen with a helicopter in Adventdalen, which is outside of a national park, asked 15 times for commercial reasons and was given permission 0 times. So this is an interesting look into the bias of the authorities, and why I don't think there's much hope that they will change their opinion regarding our permission to look at polar bears, but they will continue to let science harass polar bears as much as they feel they need to.
Okay, thank you, Mørten. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here. I wish luck to all the guides going into the Arctic this year. Oh, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, mate. And maybe you were going to summarize it. And yeah, I mean, for those who are new to the scene, this probably feels like a sitting of the UN and all of the politics involved. But perhaps a little something for guides who are newer to the Arctic. Just be prepared to change gears. I mean, safety is paramount. We've talked a lot about seeing polar bears, but it's also, you know, probably our greatest risk as staff in the field. So make sure that you're prepared to operate in polar bear habitat, that you're not thinking about all of the discussions here about, you know, creating a backstory, etc., but that you hit the ground having done your due diligence. Scouting is a real thing. As Mørten talked about, we have a lot to do with Nikita, and if I was to summarize his 30 years down at risk, he talks a lot about, you know, scan and do. Like, it's our responsibility to keep ourselves and our guests safe in polar bear habitat. So make sure, you know, for the season guides, you'll know what it's about. But it's definitely a very, very different scene to the Antarctic. So be safe out there, take your time, and just realize that it takes a lot more time to be, you know, a safe guide in the Arctic. That's all I really wanted to touch on, mate.
Thank you, Ben. That's a great wrap up and a great, I think, finishing thought for everyone who's going into the Arctic this season. to try to always make good decisions, not just for yourself and your clients, but for the animals as well. I think when we talk about justifying our existence as an industry, nothing we do could justify a bear getting hurt. So please, everybody, as Ben says, take care and make good decisions. I thank you to all of our panelists for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your information with us. Thank you to all of the attendees for joining us live. We really appreciate that, and to see the chat and the questions. I'd also like to say some thank yous to some people behind the scenes. So Alex Hansen has done a lot of work to organize this pre-season summit along with Graham, and also Pascal Terry to do much of the promotion as well. And of course, doing the tech support tonight is Lauren Farmer. So thank you again from me. And I'm going to hand over now to PTGA founder Graham for some final words.
I don't have any. Ben had a great wrap up, and I really can't improve on that. Thank you, Alex, and thanks for this team. I know it's tricky for us to do this just once a year. It's administratively difficult, some time consuming for us. But I see the comments that have come in for the panelists that we've had, and I got to say the insights that we've had from all of our panelists. What a great geographic spread and a depth of thought that has been put out there. And I really wish we could do this more often, because I think the ability to connect with these people, hear from Troels, from the trade associations and AECO, just fantastic to have you here speaking directly to guides. Mørten, Jason, Ida, Ben, just unbelievable. Wish we could do it more. As Ben said, be safe, and thank you all for coming along.